We won't carry you, sweetheart. 2 days after I told my mother I had stage 2 ovarian cancer, she gave my brother my title at the firm. She listened over wine. She finished her glass. She kissed my forehead at the door. She wore her cream silk blouse from her Southern Living cover. She did not say goodbye. I was 34. I had grown the firm from 880,000 to 4.2 million. 18 vendors took only my calls. 6 brides were waiting on wedding designs I had built. And a pink leather notebook. My name on the cover, my 14-year-old handwriting inside, sat locked in my mother's desk. I did not cry. I paid the medical bills myself. 6 months later, I brought a folder to their anniversary gala. Their wine glasses trembled. If this story is hitting you in the chest already, take a second to like and subscribe. It helps stories like mine reach the right women. Drop your location and local time in the comments below. I love knowing where you're listening from. I'm Clara Carrington, 34. Let's go back 23 weeks to the dining room where my mother made her choice. I grew up on Hawthorne Lane in North Charleston in a yellow shotgun house with a magnolia tree that bloomed 3 weeks late every spring. My father, Walter, kept his workbooks in the parlor closet. My mother, Caroline, kept her wedding magazines under the sofa. She owned a one-room bridal design shop on King Street called Carrington Floral and Design. She had founded it the year my brother was born, and she ran it the way some women run a household, as a thing that was hers and hers alone. I was 14 the summer I bought the pink leather notebook from Stationery and Such on East Bay. I had saved 12 weeks of allowance. On the inside cover, I wrote in gel pen, Clara Marie Carrington, age 14, Hawthorne Lane House, June 2005. And then I started designing weddings. By the time I got to page 12, I had drawn what I called the Low Country Garden Stack, a 5-tier tablescape with palmetto fronds, oyster shells, and stacked layers of clear vases filled with magnolia blooms at different stages of opening. I drew it 27 times before I got the spacing right. At the end of that summer, my mother found the notebook in my room while looking for a receipt. She turned through it in silence, closed it, and carried it to the locked drawer in her desk. "This is too precious to leave lying around," she said. I asked for it back twice. Both times she smiled and told me she was keeping it safe. I joined Carrington Collective formally in the spring of 2018. I was 27. My mother had renamed the firm 3 years earlier, dropped floral from the title, added the word collective, which she said sounded less rural. I had a degree in event management from Charleston Southern, 3 years of unpaid help on her weekends, and a portfolio of every bride I had quietly designed for her since high school. My mother introduced me to the staff in the back office kitchen on my first morning. There were 6 employees then. She put her hand on the small of my back and smiled and said, "This is Clara. She'll handle the logistics, behind the scenes. She's wonderful with details." I nodded. I did not say I had designed half the work hanging on the wall. That same week, the second largest country club in Charleston canceled a contract with my mother because of a scheduling error she had made twice. I rebuilt the relationship in 3 phone calls. 2 months later, I had brought back the contract and 2 more from the same family. In 7 years, I grew the firm from $880,000 in annual revenue to $4.2 million. I added 11 signature vendors who would not return calls from anyone else. I built 4 signature design systems: the Low Country Garden Stack, the Magnolia Centerpiece Method, the Tidewater Tablescape, the Heirloom Aisle Architecture. When I joined the firm, a junior attorney told me something my mother never had. The notebook, original sketches, and design names I had created before employment were mine. In 2021, I registered the 4 design names as service marks in my own name and signed Carrington Collective a limited license to use them while I served as creative director. The original notebook, drawings, and authorship record stayed mine. On paper, my mother was the public face, and I was the work behind it. That was the arrangement I told myself I could survive. I read the article in my apartment on a Tuesday morning, drinking black coffee, and I did not say anything to anyone. I smiled at her at the launch dinner. I clinked her champagne flute. My mother was the public face. I was the work. That was the arrangement. I told myself that was fine. The last family dinner I attended before everything broke was on a Sunday in March. My brother Tyler, 30 years old, 6'2", with my father's chin and our mother's confidence, was talking about a new corporate gala contract he had landed. He had not landed it. The Volk family had called me 3 weeks earlier. I had passed Tyler the introduction so he could feel useful. My mother lit up the way she only lit up for him. "That's my son," she said, and refilled his glass without asking. "Carrington blood. You can't teach this." I looked at my father. He looked at his plate. Walter had been doing that for as long as I could remember, at the dinner table, in the office hallway, in the car on the way home from school, plays where my brother had forgotten his lines. I drove home alone. I parked. I did not get out of the car for a long time. The next morning, Dr. Holloway from MUSC Hollings called. She did not ask if I had a moment to talk. The MUSC Hollings Cancer Center is on Calhoun Street, in a brick building with a glass atrium and a lobby that smells faintly of lavender and disinfectant. I went alone. I parked in the parking deck on the 3rd level. I rode the elevator with a woman my age in a yellow sundress who was holding her husband's hand. They did not look at me. Dr. Holloway was 42. She had brown hair pulled back, no makeup, a habit of clicking her pen between sentences. She asked me to sit. She said Clara twice before she said ovarian. The first time she said the word cancer, I heard it the way you hear a phone ringing in a movie. Distant, slightly tinny. Not yet about me. Stage 2. Ovaries and fallopian tubes. 1 small lesion on the omentum. "We caught it early enough," she said, and click went the pen. I asked her what early enough meant for someone like me. She said it meant surgery in 3 weeks. Total hysterectomy, bilateral salpingo oophorectomy, omentectomy. 6 rounds of chemo after, carboplatin and paclitaxel, 21 days apart. 5 months of your life, she said. Then we look at you again. I asked her about my hair. She said, yes, it will go. I did not cry in her office. I did not cry in the elevator. I cried exactly once in the parking deck, on the 3rd level, with my forehead on the steering wheel of my car. Then I drove home and answered 3 vendor emails before bed. That night, I lay in my bed in the apartment on East Bay and tried to picture telling my mother. I rehearsed the sentence. I have stage 2 ovarian cancer. I said it out loud to my ceiling fan. I said it again. I tried different rhythms. I tried a casual version, the way you might mention a flat tire. I tried a soft version. I tried a version where I let myself cry. I could not get the muscles in my face to make any of them feel real. At 3 a.m., I got up, I made tea. I sat at the kitchen table with my laptop open, and I typed, in a Word document I would never send, every single thing I needed from my parents over the next 5 months. Rides home from infusion on bad days, a grocery drop on the cycle days, someone in the house with me on the worst nights, someone to be on a phone call with me if my blood pressure dropped. I read the list twice, then I closed the document. I knew the woman on Hawthorne Lane would not have given me any of it as a teenager. I had no good reason to expect different now. The family dinner was on Wednesday, April 2nd. I came in last. My mother had set the table with the Spode china. She had opened a bottle of the Sangiovese my father liked. Tyler was there. He was on his phone. I sat down. I let her serve the soup. I let her ask me about a vendor change. And then I said it. I have stage 2 ovarian cancer. The room did the small, polite freeze that southern rooms do when something inconvenient is dropped into them. My father set his spoon down. Tyler looked at our mother. My mother, and this is the part I will remember as long as I'm alive, finished the bite she had in her mouth, chewed thoroughly, dabbed the corner of her lips with a linen napkin, and then she nodded. "And what do they want to do for you?" she asked. "Not are you all right? What do they want to do for you?" I explained. Surgery, chemo, 5 months. I would need someone to drive me home from infusion on bad days. I would need to step back from active client work for about 4 months. I would still answer phones. I would still build collections. She let me finish. Then she put down her wine. She folded her hands. She said, "We won't carry you, sweetheart. The spring 2026 brides need a planner, not a patient." My father did not look up. Tyler, to his credit, looked confused for a beat. Then he looked at our mother. And then he nodded, slowly, the way a son does when a mother is offering him something she has not yet named out loud. I picked up my own wine. I drank it. I did not finish my soup. 2 days later, my mother called an all-staff meeting at the Carrington Collective offices on Broad Street. She did this on a Friday morning. She did not invite me. I was in the apartment on East Bay, holding a heating pad to my lower abdomen, trying to memorize the surgical prep instructions. Cassidy Knox, our junior planner, 29, freckled, fiercely loyal, texted me from the conference room with her phone under the table. She's making Tyler Sr. event designer. Right now. I held the phone. The heating pad clicked off. I did not move. "Effective immediately," Cassidy texted. "Spring 2026. All 6 brides. Assigned to him. She said you'd be stepping back to focus on wellness. Clara, I'm so sorry." I wrote back 2 words. Stay calm. That afternoon, my brother sent me a text. "Hope you're doing okay, sis. Mom wants me to keep things steady while you rest. I've got it. Love you." There was no question mark at the end. There was nothing in him that wanted my answer. I made tea. I sat in the chair by the window. I watched the magnolia outside finish its bloom, and I started, very quietly, to think. Surgery was April 22nd. I checked into MUSC at 5:30 in the morning. Cassidy drove me. She did not come in. She sat in the lot for 9 hours, with a thermos of coffee and a paperback novel she did not open. I do not remember the operating room well. I remember the cold of the IV. I remember the anesthesiologist asking me to count back from 10. I made it to 7. When I woke, my mouth was dry. There was a nurse next to me. She asked me if I had any family in the waiting room. I told her my brother had a wedding tasting. I told her my mother had a board call. Both of those things were true. My father did not come. He sent one text at 11 a.m. Thinking of you, Clara Bear. He used the name he had called me when I was 4. I read it twice. I put the phone face down. I had been under for 6 hours and 40 minutes. They had removed my ovaries, my fallopian tubes, my uterus, and a piece of the omental fat from my abdomen. I would not have my own biological children. That was the math of stage 2. That was the deal you made to live. I lay there. I did not cry. I asked the nurse for water. She brought it in a small styrofoam cup with a bendy straw. 3 days later, recovering in my apartment, Cassidy forwarded me a copy of an internal client transition memo she had been told to print for the office. Mark Travers, the corporate attorney who had advised Carrington Collective for years, had prepared it at my mother's request. The subject line read, Spring 2026 Client Coverage. The memo named Tyler Interim, lead for all 6 spring brides, and instructed staff to route every question about me through Caroline. It had been drafted before I even had surgery. I saved the attachment to a personal drive and did not answer anyone. Chemo cycle 1 was a Tuesday morning in May. The infusion suite at MUSC had 8 reclining chairs, arranged around a central nursing station, each angled toward a window. I picked the corner one because it had a small ledge where I could rest my laptop. The IV stand beeped every 19 seconds. The chemo bag was pale yellow. The nurse, Maddie, with a coral-painted thumbnail and stickers covering her name tag, told me the first round was usually the easiest. Don't try to be a hero, she said. Eat something even when it tastes like a penny. I worked through the whole drip. I answered emails. I confirmed a tasting menu. Cassidy ran the office side. We had built a Google sheet we called Soft Triage, where I cleared things she did not have authority to clear. Around hour 3, Cassidy texted, Tyler just canceled the Tideline photography meeting. Said he'd reschedule next week. They've been holding the date for 6 months. I wrote back from the reclining chair. Forward me Tideline's contact. I'll call him myself. I did. Hank Tideline had photographed every Carrington wedding since 2014. When he heard my voice, he went quiet. Then he said, Sweetheart, where did they put you? I told him the truth. He said, You let me know what to do. By the 2nd week, my mother had blocked me from the firm's inbox. Her email to the staff was 3 lines long. Clara is on medical leave through September. All work communication should route through Tyler. We are giving her the gift of rest. I read it on my phone, sitting on the edge of the bathtub in my apartment, the smell of metallic blood faint at the back of my throat from the chemo. The chemo had given me a chemical taste that lived in my saliva for 10 days at a time. Tyler used the Low Country Garden stack in a vendor meeting on a Tuesday. He used the Magnolia Centerpiece method in a tasting on a Wednesday. He did not credit either. He told one bride by speakerphone with Cassidy in the room that we developed these signature looks in-house by the Carrington team. Cassidy texted me a transcript word for word. I did not respond for an hour. Then I wrote, "Save every message, timestamp screenshots. Keep them somewhere personal." She wrote back, "Already started a folder." Ginevra Halloran showed up at my door on a Sunday afternoon in early June. She was 68. She had been my mother's senior planner for 24 years. She had also been the person who taught me how to fold a place card in 7th grade. My mother had pushed her into retirement in February of 2024, citing budget realities. The real reason was that Ginevra had once told my mother, in a parking lot after a wedding, that she had heard her dismiss me to a bride as our designer behind the scenes. Clara is good with details, less so with people. Ginevra brought Low Country boil in a copper pot. She brought sweet tea in a mason jar. She also brought a manila envelope. She set the pot on the stove. She poured the tea into 2 glasses. She sat down across from me at my small kitchen table. She did not speak about the cancer. She slid the envelope across the table. She said, "I have been holding this for 18 months. I waited until it would matter." Inside the envelope was a single photograph. It had been taken with a phone, looking through a half-open office door. The angle was low. Ginevra had been pretending to crouch and fix a heel. In the picture, my mother was sitting at her desk. The pink leather notebook from my 14th summer was open in front of her. She was tilting the book toward Tyler, who looked 28 in the photo, baby-faced, grinning, and her finger was on page 12, on the Low Country Garden stack. There was a date stamp from Ginevra's phone in the corner. It read October 4th, 2023. I had been recovering from outpatient surgery for an ovarian cyst scare that later proved benign on that exact date in this same apartment. My mother had opened the locked drawer where the notebook had lived since 2005. She had taken out a part of me I had not seen in 19 years. She had walked it to my brother. "This is your inheritance, Tyler. Every page in here, the Low Country stack, page 12, the Magnolia method, page 19. One day this will all be yours." I sat in my kitchen on a Sunday afternoon with my best friend's mother across the table, and I felt the small click of something old and warm in my chest go cold and hard. I picked up my phone. I opened the South Carolina Secretary of State website. I searched available LLC names. The 3rd cycle of chemo was on June 17th. By that point, my hair had thinned, but not yet gone. I wore a soft sage green scarf wound twice around my head and tied at the nape because the air conditioning in the infusion suite was set to 65 degrees, and the cold settled into the scalp first. The waiting area had a small wooden rack of magazines on the wall by the coffee station. Southern Living, Garden and Gun, Charleston Magazine, Veranda. I had stopped reading them 8 months earlier. They cost me too much professionally. But on the 17th, while I was waiting for the blood work results that would tell me whether my white cell count was high enough for the cycle, I picked up Southern Living, July 2025. My mother was on the cover. She was sitting on a tufted bench in the garden of the Cornelia Estate on Charleston Harbor. The light was that exact 10 a.m. low country light I had calibrated in 3 of our wedding shoots. She was wearing the cream silk blouse. Her hair was glossed and pulled half up. Her smile was the practiced one, the one she used in vendor negotiations, the one that meant, of course, you'll say yes. The headline, in a soft serif, "The Woman Who Built Carrington Collective." I sat down in one of the waiting room chairs with my scarf still on. I opened the article on page 63. The interviewer, a young woman named Greer something, whose byline I did not recognize, had asked my mother how she had developed the firm's now famous design language. My mother's answers were quoted in italics, the way magazines like Southern Living do for the women they want to seem warm. I designed the low country garden stack one morning at sunrise on Sullivan's Island, she had said. I had a cup of black coffee in my hand, and the palmettos were just starting to throw shadows on the sand. It came to me in one piece. I had drawn the low country garden stack on page 12 of my pink leather notebook in June of 2005. I had been sitting on the floor of my bedroom on Hawthorne Lane, eating watermelon out of a Tupperware, listening to my brother cry because he had been told he couldn't have a Game Boy. The heirloom aisle architecture, my mother told the interviewer, I dreamed up during my honeymoon in Italy. The cypress trees, the Tuscan light. I came home and sketched it on a paper napkin. The heirloom aisle architecture was filed with the United States Patent and Trademark Office on March 14th, 2021. Filed by Clara Marie Carrington. The original sketches lived on page 19 of the same pink notebook, under my 14-year-old handwriting. I set the magazine on my lap. The fluorescent light buzzed faintly. A man 2 chairs over coughed into a paper mask. I did not cry. I did not breathe out loud. I did not feel anything I could have named in that moment. I just thought, oh, so that is what is happening. The nurse called me back. My white cell count was high enough. We could go ahead with cycle 3. I sat in the corner chair again. I plugged my laptop in. While the IV ran, I opened a new document. At the top, I typed Hawthorne Lane Events, Operating Plan, June 17, 2025. When I got home that night, I texted Cassidy. 3 words. Come over now, bring your laptop, bring the printer. She arrived in 40 minutes with a kettle of soup from her mother. I had bought the domain by the time she set the soup down. That night, between 11 and a quarter past midnight, on a folding card table in my living room, with chemo coursing through my body and my mother smiling from the magazine cover face down beside the keyboard, Cassidy and I filed for Hawthorne Lane Events, LLC. I picked the name because Hawthorne Lane was the street I had grown up on, and because the magnolia tree there had taught me, before anyone else did, that you can bloom 3 weeks late and still be the most beautiful thing on the block. I signed the electronic signature with a finger that shook just a little. The site sent a confirmation email at 11:43 p.m. on June 17th, 2025. It is the most important email I have ever received. If you've ever had someone in your own family take credit for something you built with your own 2 hands, drop it in the comments. Not for sympathy, for receipts. Tell me how you found out. Tell me what you did the night you knew. I'm reading every one of these. I'm reading them because for 19 years, I thought I was the only person this had ever happened to. I wasn't. You aren't. Cassidy's phone buzzed at 2 a.m. She read the text. She lifted her eyes to mine. "Clara," she said. "Madeline Whitcomb just texted. She's not happy with Tyler. I made the vendor calls between cycle 3 and cycle 6, 11 of them. On the days I felt strongest, I made the first 5 myself, with the scarf retied and my voice softened by ginger tea. Cassidy handled the remaining 6 follow-ups from her apartment, with me listening in only when a decision required my name. I started with Hank Tideline. "Hank," I said, "I'm opening something new. Hawthorne Lane Events. I'm not asking you to abandon a contract. I'm asking whether, when I leave Carrington, you will consider coming with the designer who built your work into these rooms." He did not pause. He said, "Send me the paperwork by Friday." Cassidy followed with Magnolia Stem Florals, Knox Whitcomb Calligraphy, Stillwater Tent Company, the Letter Press in West Ashley, the Cake Studio in Mount Pleasant, the String Quartet, the Rentals Warehouse, the Linen Rental, the Bartending Service, and the Lighting Designer. 11 vendors signed preferred partner letters with Hawthorne Lane Events, all effective January 1st, 2026. I was not trying to own anyone else's business. I was building a future network that would begin after I formally left my mother's firm. On August 1st, an outside attorney sent Caroline and Mark Travers my resignation notice, effective August 15th. The same notice confirmed that Carrington's limited license to use my 4 design names would end on December 31st. Until then, the firm could complete commitments already booked under those names. It could not sell new work under them or claim Caroline had created them. After that, the work would follow the author who had built it. Once my resignation took effect, Cassidy ran the bride conversations on Zoom from her studio apartment, with a backdrop of a hand-painted Charleston Harbor map I had given her for Christmas in 2023. Her script was simple. "Hi, this is Cassidy. I am calling about a change in lead creative direction on your wedding. Clara would like 15 minutes to explain your options personally." 4 of the 6 brides had signed personal services writers naming me as their lead creative director. The writers said that if Carrington replaced me, each bride could end the planning agreement without a penalty and recover any uncommitted planning retainer. They were free to stay. They were free to leave. They were never promised to me. 2 of those 4, Faye Forsyth and Vivian Holcomb, got on Zoom with me directly. I wore the scarf. I told them the truth. I said, "I am opening my own firm. You have the right to leave Carrington without a penalty because I was removed from your wedding. You do not owe me your business. But the vendors you care about have agreed to honor your date under Hawthorne Lane if you choose to come. I would be honored to stay with you." Faye cried. Vivian did not. Both signed releases from Carrington and New Hawthorne agreements that night. 2 more brides, Madeline Whitcomb and Tilda Marchand, needed a longer conversation. We were getting to those. In late August, between cycle 5 and cycle 6, when my hair had gone entirely and I had started wearing the scarf even at home, I sat with the outside attorney at my kitchen table, and reviewed the 4 service mark registrations, the limited license from 2021, and the termination notice that would take effect at the end of the year. The legal work was not glamorous. It was dates, signatures, and clean language. An independent mobile notary came to my apartment that afternoon. Cassidy handled the copies and filing labels. I signed each page once and went back to bed. As the notary packed her stamp, she looked at me and said, "You take care of yourself, baby. You hear me?" I sat at the kitchen table for 9 minutes after she left. Then I put the papers in the navy folder. On the last Sunday of August, the morning after Cycle 5, Ginevra came to my apartment with a small wooden box she had carried in both hands the whole way from her car. She did not knock. She let herself in with the spare key I had given her in June. She set the box on the kitchen counter. She poured 2 glasses of sweet tea. She said Caroline ordered the back archive cleared before the gala. The office manager asked me to identify old client binders and personal items before they were hauled away. This was in a carton marked Clara, school things in your mother's handwriting. She told me to take anything personal to you. She opened the box. Inside was the pink leather notebook. I had not seen it in 19 years. I picked it up. The cover had softened. The gel pen signature on the inside, Clara Marie Carrington, age 14, Hawthorne Lane House, June 2005, was still legible. The pages had yellowed at the edges. I turned to page 12, the Low Country Garden Stack. My 14-year-old handwriting was crowded and earnest. I had drawn it 27 times. There was a small palmetto frond pressed flat in the binding. I held the notebook against my chest. I bent forward over the kitchen table. For the first time in 5 months, I let out a sound. It was not a sob. It was something older than that. Ginevra put her hand on my shoulder. She did not say anything. My phone rang on the counter. The screen said Madeline Whitcomb, direct call. It was the first time a bride had called me, instead of texting Cassidy, in 6 months. I met Madeline Whitcomb at a small coffee shop on Spring Street 4 days later. It was a Tuesday. I wore the sage scarf. I wore a navy linen dress that hung looser than it had in May. I got there 12 minutes early because my body did not move as fast as it used to. Madeline came in wearing a cream sundress and bare feet in espadrilles. She was 31. She was an architecture associate at a Charleston firm. Her wedding was scheduled for May 2nd, 2026, at Magnolia Plantation. The contracted budget was $480,000. She had paid us a $100,000 deposit in November of 2024. She slid into the booth across from me. Her mascara was already running. She did not say hello. She said, "He yelled at me last Thursday on a Zoom call." I said, "Tell me everything." Madeline pulled out her phone. She opened her inbox to an email from my brother. The subject line read, "Venue Concern, Magnolia." She turned the screen toward me. The email was 4 paragraphs long. The first 3 were a soft, lawyerly explanation of why Madeline's request to move her ceremony from the South Lawn to the River Terrace, a request she had made because her grandmother could no longer walk the path, was not feasible at this stage in planning. The 4th paragraph read, "Frankly, Madeline, brides who can't commit to a vision don't deserve the Carrington signature treatment. We've earned it through years of curation, and we expect our clients to honor that posture. Madeline put her hand over her mouth. She said, "He called me a bride who can't commit. My grandmother is dying. I asked for one accommodation. One." I read the email 3 times. I gave the phone back to her. I said, "Madeline, look at me." She looked at me. Her eyes were red. Mine were tired but steady. I said, "Your contract includes the personal services rider naming me as lead creative director. Carrington replaced me. That gives you the right to end their planning agreement without a penalty and recover any uncommitted planning retainer. It does not force you to follow me. I am opening Hawthorne Lane events. The vendors you need have agreed to honor your date if you choose to move. Your grandmother will walk the river terrace if she still wants to. I am asking you, woman to woman, with my scarf on my head and my own blood still running poison from this morning's pill, to come with me too." She signed the amendment letter on a paper napkin. We made it formal 3 days later. Within 10 days, 3 more brides signed. Faye Forsyth on a Wednesday, Vivienne Holcomb on a Thursday, Tilda Marchand on a Friday, after Cassidy drove out to Beaufort to meet her at her stable, where Tilda's wedding horse, an Andalusian named Cassiopeia, was being saddled in preparation for the ceremony rehearsal. Tilda was 28. She was a 3rd-generation dressage rider, and her wedding had been planned originally as a small low-country ceremony in the riding ring she had grown up in. Tyler had argued with her 4 times in 9 months, once about the absence of a head table, once about her insistence on barefoot bridesmaids, once about the live oak she had asked to be left untrimmed. He had, in their last call, told her she would, quote, learn to trust the firm's eye if she had any taste at all. She had hung up on him. When Cassidy showed up in Beaufort with Hawthorne Lane paperwork and a thermos of coffee, Tilda was on the back of Cassiopeia, taking her around the ring for a rehearsal trot. Tilda came down off the horse. She read the contract over the saddle. She signed it on Cassiopeia's flank with a Sharpie Cassidy handed her. She did not blink. The other 2 brides, Honor Sutton and Cosima Vance, were new bookings from 2025. They had never met me. They had only worked with Tyler. They stayed with Carrington. That was the math. That was fine. I had built a firm. I was not stealing one. By the 2nd week of September, with cycle 6 administered, my white cell count finally rising, my eyebrows starting their slow return, I sat in the living room of my apartment at 1 a.m. with a pink leather notebook on my lap, 4 signed amendment letters in a manila folder on my coffee table, 11 vendor contracts on the floor in a stack, and my registered LLC paperwork pinned to the wall. For the first time in 5 months, I smiled. I did not smile because of the wedding business. I smiled because I had spent 19 years believing my mother kept a part of me locked away because she was protecting it. That night, with the notebook in my lap, I understood she had kept it locked away because she was hiding it from me, from the world, from the inheritance she had quietly promised to my brother. She had not stolen my work, I realized, because she resented me. She had stolen my work because she had never planned for me to outlast her. I closed the notebook. I put the kettle on. I made myself a cup of ginger tea. I drank it in the dark. The next morning, an email landed in my personal inbox from my mother. The subject line was Anniversary Gala, Family Expectations. The body was 3 sentences long. Clara. The showcase gala is October 11th at the Cornelia Estate. We expect you. There will be no excuses about your health. Cassidy walked into my apartment on the last Friday of September with her laptop under her arm and a manila envelope in her hand. She did not say hello. She set a printed page on the dining table. She said, "Ginevra found this in the conference room printer tray yesterday. Caroline had printed it before leaving for the NACE conference and forgotten it there. The headers are intact. It came from Caroline's personal email to Mark Travers, with Dad copied at the Carrington household address. Ginevra photographed it before the office manager returned the original to Caroline's files. Read it. The email was from my mother to Mark Travers, the firm's corporate attorney. It was dated September 20th. The subject line was estate planning. Quiet update. The body was 4 sentences long. I read it aloud. Mark, Walter, and I have been thinking. Clara has been so brave through everything, and we hope, of course, for the best outcome. But the firm cannot be left vulnerable. If, and we hope it doesn't come to that, but if the difficult path comes, we want everything to pass cleanly to Tyler, with the Carrington name, and our legacy whole. Could you put the right papers together quietly, so Walter and I have peace of mind? She doesn't need to know. There's no need to upset her in her treatments. Caroline." Cassidy watched my face. I did not move for a long moment. Then I said, "Print 3 copies. 1 for the folder, 1 for the bank box, 1 for Ginevra." Cassidy nodded. I read the email 7 more times that night. I read it standing up in the kitchen. I read it sitting down on the couch. I read it once with the lamp off. I read it once with the notebook from 2005 open beside it, on page 12. My mother's prose was very soft. She used the phrase, "the difficult path." She used the phrase quietly. She used the phrase peace of mind. She did not use the phrase if she dies. She used the phrase the best outcome. My mother had grown up in Beaufort. She had been taught, in 1,000 small ways, that the cruelest sentences were the softest ones. She had built a career on it. I printed 3 copies. I slid one into the navy leather folder I had bought from a stationery store on King Street. I slid one into a manila envelope and addressed it to my safe deposit box at Wells Fargo. I slid one into a smaller envelope for Ginevra and wrote on the front in pencil, "Hold for me." I did not cry. I did not call anyone. I sat on the couch with the folder in my lap until 2:30 a.m. Then I went to bed and slept 7 hours, which was the most sleep I had gotten in 19 weeks. Ginevra came back 2 days later with the photograph. It was the same picture she had shown me in June. Caroline at her desk, Tyler beside her, the pink notebook open to page 12. But this time, Ginevra had brought the original full-resolution file on a small thumb drive. She had also brought a second photograph I had not seen. The second photograph was of Caroline alone, holding the notebook up to her phone, taking a picture of page 19, heirloom aisle architecture. The picture had been taken on Ginevra's birthday, December 2nd, 2024. Caroline had been preparing the Southern Living interview that would appear 6 months later. In the photo, the notebook was tilted at exactly the angle the magazine would use for its full-page editorial spread. The page my mother had photographed was the page she would later describe to Southern Living as having been dreamed up on her honeymoon in Italy in 1990. I looked at the photograph for a long time. Then I asked Ginevra if she would come with me to the gala. She said, "Sweetheart, I would have come if you had not asked." I assembled the folder on the night of October 9th. Inside, in order, the voicemail transferred to a small USB drive labeled April 5th, the printed transcript of the voicemail, 3 printed copies of the September 20th email from my mother, certified copies of the 4 Federal Service Mark registrations in my name, the 2021 limited license agreement and the termination notice, 11 preferred partner letters from the vendors effective January 1st, 4 Carrington releases and new Hawthorne agreements from the brides, the Southern Living. July 2025 issue with sticky tabs on pages 63 and 64, and in a small acid-free archival sleeve, the pink leather notebook from June of 2005. I closed the folder. I sat on the floor of my bedroom with it in my lap. I touched the sage green scarf folded on my dresser. I had 4 millimeters of fuzz on my scalp. The chemo had ended 3 weeks earlier. My eyebrows were back. My eyelashes were not. I picked the scarf up. I looked at it. I put it back down. I made my decision. I would walk in with my own head. The morning of October 11th, I woke at 6. I drank water. I took a pill. I made tea. I sat at my kitchen table with the navy folder in front of me and the pink notebook beside it. I dressed at 3 in the afternoon. The dress was a long navy column with a Bardot neckline cut to fall straight from the shoulders. I had bought it in 2023 for a wedding in Beaufort. It still fit. The chemo had taken 11 pounds I had not asked it to take. I did not adjust it. I did not wear a scarf. I did not wear a wig. I had 4 millimeters of soft brown fuzz on my scalp. I put on a single coat of red lipstick, a shade called Magnolia Heart, a shade Caroline had told me years ago was too forward for someone in your position. I put on the pearl earrings Walter had given me on my 16th birthday. He had picked them himself. They had a small flaw on the left one. I had always loved that. I picked up the folder. I picked up the notebook in its archival sleeve. I walked downstairs. Cassidy was waiting in her old Audi with the engine running. She looked at me. She did not say anything about my hair. She said, "Ready?" I said, "Yes." The Cornelia estate sits on a curve of the harbor, just past the old battery. It is white painted, 2 stories, with a wraparound porch and 300-year-old live oaks dripping Spanish moss over the front lawn. My mother had booked the entire property 6 months ahead. Carrington 2026 season showcase, combined with the 35th anniversary celebration of Walter and Caroline Carrington. There were 180 guests, 6 brides who had been invited months earlier for the spring 2026 showcase, 4 already released from Carrington, 2 still contracted to it, 11 signature vendors, 2 Southern Living editors, 2 wedding bloggers, the mayor's wife, 3 women from the Charleston Junior League who had taught me to fold a place card in 7th grade, alongside Ginevra. The valet, a kid from Mount Pleasant in a white jacket, took Cassidy's keys. The doorman opened the door. The string quartet was playing in the entry hall, the same quartet that had signed a preferred partner letter with Hawthorne Lane Events for the 2026 season. I walked through the entry. I walked past the oyster bar. I walked into the main ballroom. A small, polite hush moved through the room like a wave. 300 eyes registered, all at once, that I had walked in with my own head. I had thought about this moment for 43 days. I had pictured myself in a wig. I had pictured myself in the scarf. I had pictured myself in a hat shaped like a bell with a small veil tucked over the back. I had pictured all of them and rejected all of them. The chemo had taken my ovaries, my uterus, my eyelashes, my hair, my appetite, my body's ability to sleep through the night, and a future I had not yet learned how to grieve. It would not also take my willingness to walk into a room and let people see me. A woman near the entrance, Sloane Whitcomb, Madeline's mother, caught my eye. She inhaled once and lifted her chin to mirror mine. A man at the bar set his bourbon down so carefully it did not click against the glass. The string quartet's first violin missed a single note and recovered. The mayor's wife stood up at her table, not to make a scene, just to be visibly upright in the moment I crossed the floor. I will remember that for as long as I live. My mother was at the head table. She had a champagne flute in her right hand. She had been laughing. She saw me. Her smile, for 1 second only, slipped. Then it came back, wider, crisper. "Clara, darling," she said, loud enough for the closest 20 guests to hear. "You came." I did not answer. I walked toward her. I stopped 6 feet from her chair. I nodded once. I said, "Hello, Mother." My father stood up at his place. He looked at me. He looked at my scalp. He looked at the floor. He sat back down. Tyler was already on the small carpeted stage. He was holding a microphone. He was wearing a blue blazer. He had a stack of index cards in his other hand. The lights dimmed. The string quartet finished. A spotlight came up on the stage. Tyler began. "Good evening, friends, family, and the brides of the Carrington class of 2026. Thank you for joining us tonight to celebrate both the legacy of my parents' 35 years and the launch of our most exquisite season yet." He paused. He smiled. He looked at his cards. "Our first bride of the evening, Honor Sutton, please stand." Honor stood. Polite applause. "Our second bride, Faye Forsyth, please stand." Faye did not stand. She looked at me from across the room. Tyler repeated her name. His smile tightened. Madeline Whitcomb stood instead. She did not raise her voice. "Before you continue," she said, "Faye, Vivienne, Tilda, and I signed releases from Carrington. We are no longer part of this showcase." Tilda stood beside her. Then Vivienne. Then Faye. The room shifted. Tyler looked down at the index cards in his hand, then toward my mother. He opened his mouth. Nothing came out. I lifted the navy folder. I walked toward the stage. The microphone in Tyler's hand slipped a half-inch. He did not let it go. I climbed the 3 carpeted steps. I stood beside him. He smelled like sweat and cologne. I held out my hand, palm up. He gave me the microphone. My mother, at the head table, set down her champagne flute. The crystal hit the table a little too hard. The waiter behind her, holding a tray of canapés, froze. I set the navy folder down on the small podium. I set the pink notebook beside it. I opened the cover of the notebook. I tapped the inside front page. The gel pen signature, Clara Marie Carrington, age 14, Hawthorne Lane House, June 2005, was visible to the front row. I lifted the microphone. I said, I built this in 2005, at age 14. My mother kept it locked in her desk for 19 years. My mother stood. She was practiced at this. She had been a public face for 30 years. She knew how to recover a room. She walked to the foot of the stage with her champagne in her hand. She smiled the smile from Southern Living. Clara, sweetheart, she said, voice silk soft, voice carrying. This isn't the time. We are celebrating 35 years of love. Tomorrow we can sit down at the office and talk about whatever you'd like. She lifted her champagne. She turned to the room, to the Carrington Collective, to family, to the long road. A few people out of habit raised their glasses. I did not raise my glass. I turned the page of the pink notebook to page 12. I lifted the notebook so the front row could see. The 14-year-old handwriting was crowded and earnest. The 5-tier Low Country garden stack was sketched 27 times across 2 facing pages. I picked up the July 2025 issue of Southern Living from the folder. I opened it to page 63. The full-spread editorial photograph showed the same 5-tier stack, palmetto fronds, oyster shells, layered vases of magnolia, set up at a wedding I had not actually planned, but my mother had told the magazine she had designed. I held both up side by side. This page is dated June of 2005, I said. That photograph is dated June of 2024. My mother described this design to Southern Living as a vision she had on Sullivan's Island. It is mine. It has always been mine. My mother laughed once. It was the same laugh she had used at the family dinner in March. Light, dismissive. Sweetheart, she said. Those are common low country forms. Palmettos, oysters, magnolias. Every designer in the South works with them. She turned to the room with that smile. We've been worried about her, she said gently. Chemo memory is a real thing. The poor lamb has lost her place a little. It happens. A woman in the second row, a junior league friend of my mother's, laughed nervously. A few others looked at their plates. Tyler tried to put his hand on my elbow. I did not let him. Mother, I said, I'm not finished. I reached into the folder. I pulled out the small USB drive. I lifted my chin to the audio technician at the side of the room. He was Cassidy's cousin. He had been hired by Hawthorne Lane 2 weeks earlier. He took the USB. He inserted it into the ballroom's audio system. He pressed play. My mother's voice came through every speaker in the Cornelia estate. We won't carry you, sweetheart. The spring 2026 brides need a planner, not a patient. 180 guests heard it. The string quartet members behind their music stands lowered their bows. The Southern Living editor, a woman in a green wrap dress, took out her phone. She did not lift it to record. She just held it, the way a witness does. The voicemail cut off. The room was silent. I lifted the September 20th email from the folder. I read it slowly into the microphone. Mark, Walter, and I have been thinking. Clara has been so brave through everything, and we hope, of course, for the best outcome. But the firm cannot be left vulnerable. If, and we hope it doesn't come to that, but if the difficult path comes, we want everything to pass cleanly to Tyler, with the Carrington name and our legacy whole. Could you put the right papers together quietly, so Walter and I have peace of mind? She doesn't need to know. There's no need to upset her in her treatments. Caroline. I lifted my eyes. I looked at my father. I said, Daddy. Mom wrote, Walter and I. Did she ever ask you to make that plan? My father's hand went to his throat. He had been copied at the household address they used for taxes and insurance, but the message had never become a conversation. My mother had put his name into the sentence because it made her decision sound shared. He looked at my mother. He stood up from the head table. He did not speak. He walked very slowly toward the small carpeted stage. He stopped at the foot of it. He did not climb up. He stood there. He looked at his wife of 35 years. He did not recognize her. I had not in 34 years seen my father look at my mother the way a stranger looks at a person whose photograph he has just seen in a newspaper. He did not seem angry. He did not seem ashamed. He seemed only newly arrived, as if he had just been handed a map of his own marriage and found on the back a country he had never been told about. He looked up at me. I saw him understand all at once what had been written in his name and without his consent. He blinked twice. He did not speak, but I also remembered him at the April table, eyes on his plate, while his wife told me they would not carry me. He had not written this plan. He had only made it possible to write. The Carrington Collective head table had 3 couples seated at it besides my parents, old friends of theirs from a country club in Mount Pleasant. None of them moved. One woman, in a pearl gray gown, set her dinner fork down on her plate with a soft chime and folded her hands in her lap. The ballroom was so quiet I could hear the ice melting in the champagne buckets along the wall. My mother's lower lip moved. Her smile, the Southern living smile, was gone. She still held the champagne flute. The flute was filled 3/4 full. Her hand began to shake. The pale yellow liquid trembled at the rim. A drop spilled over and ran down the side of her index finger. She did not seem to notice. The wine glasses on the head table, all 6 of them, my father's, hers, Tyler's, 2 empty ones, mine, trembled in sympathy with her hand. Or perhaps it was my imagination. Perhaps it was only her glass. But every guest near the head table later swore the entire table shook. Madeline Whitcomb stood up first. She walked in her cream sundress and her espadrilles toward the foot of the stage. Tilda Marchand followed, then Vivienne, then Faye. The 11 signature vendors stood, 1 row at a time, as if some current had passed through them. Hank Tideline, 62, stood up. Liesel from Magnolia Stem stood up. The string quartet members stepped down from their music stands and stood with the vendors. Mark Travers, the corporate attorney, stood up. He looked at my mother. He looked at my father. He picked up his briefcase. He walked out. Tyler turned away from me on the stage. He stepped down, set his index cards on the edge of the podium, and went through the side door marked Service Only. The door shut behind him. He did not come back. I closed the navy folder. I lifted the pink leather notebook. I slid it back into its archival sleeve. I leaned to the microphone one last time. "The firm is yours, Mother," I said. "The building is yours. The name on the door is yours. I have left nothing behind for you to inherit, except the work of your own hands." Which was always less than you said it was. I did not raise my voice. I said, "I don't need you to carry me. I never did. I just thought you'd want to." I stepped down from the stage. I did not look at my mother. I did not look at my brother. I looked at my father for one breath. He had tears on his face. He nodded once, very small. I nodded back. I walked out the way I had come in. Cassidy was at the wheel of the Audi by the time I reached the bottom of the porch steps. Madeline, Tilda, Vivienne, Faye, and Ginevra followed me out. 4 brides in their dinner dresses, one 68-year-old in a violet shawl. We did not speak. The string quartet violinist, a young woman named Annika, came down the steps last and slipped into the back seat. I sat in the passenger side. Cassidy pulled away from the Cornelia estate. The valet, the kid from Mount Pleasant, opened his mouth to say something polite, then closed it. I pulled my phone out. I opened the Hawthorne Lane Events website. I tapped the small launch button I had built into the admin dashboard a week earlier. At 9:52 p.m. on October 11th, 2025, Hawthorne Lane Events went live. 4 spring 2026 weddings, 11 preferred creative partners, 4 protected design marks, 1 creative director. I set the phone face down on my lap. I closed my eyes for 1 block of King Street. By 5:32 the next morning, I was standing on the beach at Sullivan's Island. I had driven myself there at 4. Cassidy was asleep in my guest room. Madeline was asleep on my couch. Ginevra was in the spare bed. I had walked to my car with the pink notebook in my hand. I had driven over the bridge. I had parked at Station 22. The sand was cold. The water was darker than the sky. The sun was 12 minutes from rising. My hair, 4 millimeters of soft brown fuzz, caught the wind. I sat down on the sand. I put the notebook beside me. I cried. Not the way I had cried at 14 on the floor of my bedroom on Hawthorne Lane. Not the way I had cried at the steering wheel in the MUSC parking deck. I cried the way a woman cries when she has, for the first time in her adult life, paid all of her own bills, signed all of her own contracts, kept all of her own work, and refused all of the love that came with conditions. The sun came up. I watched it. If you've ever had to walk away from someone whose blood you share, hear me say this once. The boundary is not cruelty. The boundary is the only language some families understand. If this story moved you, take care of yourself tonight. Drink water. Call someone who loves you back. You don't owe anyone a body they refused to value. You don't owe anyone the work of your own 2 hands. My name is on the door now, and no one is signing it but me.